nearby application. So dignitaries on the dais, Renuji, I think that was a very interesting presentation, a very great presentation by Renu Budhiraj from the Department of Information Technology. We've been working very closely with the IT on their cloud strategy, and I must say that I have to congratulate them on their vision. The interesting thing is that if you think about all these jargon which we use about the cloud and social and mobility and analytics, the interesting thing is that the consumers have actually adopted all these technologies without even questioning what the challenges are. If you look at the government, I think I give a lot of credit to the government of India to take some of these bold decisions, to come out with a cloud-first policy, to ensure that all future applications are going to be developed on the cloud. Because if I look at the private sector, and I look at large enterprises, and I look at even small and medium enterprises, their adoption of cloud and any of these other technologies has been really painfully slow. So I think a lot of the people who are here on the dais as IT secretaries in different states, they've done a tremendous job in providing some great citizen services based on a cloud-based infrastructure. What I'd like to share with you today is to talk not so much about what are the benefits, but really to talk to you about what are the future challenges. Because I think we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. Great work which has been done, but I think the challenges ahead are that much more enormous. I had an opportunity to look at the BJP manifesto, which now more or less is becoming the Government of India manifesto, and there isn't a sector which is not going to be touched by IT. So all of a sudden, the standards or what needs to be done suddenly has gone up. And also, the pace at which this government wants to move is exceedingly high, and therefore the challenges are that much greater. So I wanted to share a few thoughts about what is possible in the era of the cloud. The first thing, which when I talk to CEOs or CXOs or the secretaries of Government of India, the first thing they're saying is, how safe are my applications and my data in the public cloud? Will the public cloud increase my regulatory risk? And how can I justify moving to the cloud? And if you heard what Renu had to say, the Government of India has tried to cover or assure across each one of these areas to provide some sort of assurances, some standards, some policies. And that I think is a great thing. But I want you to understand that where we are is really using cloud technologies at what I call the enterprise scale. If you think about the Government of India today and you add up every single server across all state governments and across all government departments, there will be less than 10,000 servers. If you really want to get the benefits of the economy of the cloud, if you really want to get and understand what is possible with the cloud, and I just wanted to show you what the difference is between what I call enterprise IT and cloud scale. In terms of servers, if you're really talking about cloud scale, you're talking about 1 million servers. That's the number of servers which Microsoft has in its cloud services which it provides on a global basis. You're talking about data access, which is push, not pull. Currently today, there is a lot of restrictions and a lot of inability, although the government has some great plans to release some of this data through their open data policy. Budgets are basically on the basis of rates. It's not about fixed costs. Architectures are integrated, not siloed. Application integration is tight. It's not loosely coupled. And that's what exactly Renu was saying is the problem we have today. Most of the applications for e-governance were written in the era of client-server. So there's a very tight coupling. Trying to split up the application to make it multi-tenanted so that the same application can be used by multiple government departments across multiple states is not going to be an easy task. And trying to rewrite it, and we've had the privilege of working with the government of India to take a few applications and try and see what is the cost or what is it required to be able to make that multi-talented. And the fact matter is that it is huge, and I don't think it makes sense to do that in a lot of those applications. It would perhaps make sense to rewrite those applications. We're talking about reach, which is on a global or a national basis. It's not just in a particular state. So therefore, networking, the kind of fiber optic networks which are required are huge and massive. Hardware, you use typically commodity hardware. That's how you keep the costs low. Deployment is completely automated. One of the key requirements to say that something is on a cloud is that it is provisioned by the user, it is elastic, and that it can be metered so that you can charge on a usage basis. And most of the applications we are seeing currently really don't have those characteristics. Operability, you look at mean time to repair. It's not a question of how much is the mean time between failure. Security is intrinsic. It's built into every element of the application, the network, the data. Deployment is in minutes. It's not in terms of weeks and months. And administration is based on application programming interfaces, which is something which we will have to work on here in India to make sure that all the different kinds of cloud services release their APIs so that developers can create applications based on those APIs. Now, what constitutes an enterprise-grade cloud service? Number one is that you need globally redundant data centers. And yes, while we're looking at it from a national footprint, you also sometimes make sure that you have data centers in other parts of the world so that in case of a catastrophe, you can actually move it across. You need huge, massive networks. You need dark fiber between the hubs with multiple international edge points to minimize latency. Speed is going to be important, especially if you think about education and where you want to play back video. Even communications of the kind where you want to interact on a video right down to the district level with a citizen will require huge dark fiber capacity. You're continually advancing in the areas of compliance. Most of the data centers which you see here in India, the public data centers, the hosting companies, they are all ISO 27001 approved. But what we need is the EU model clauses for data privacy. We need HIPAA for health. We need FISMA for financial security. There is no data center in India today, government or otherwise, which fulfills these criteria. So I think we need to be very clear that what we are offering is really, like I said, the tip of the iceberg. We need to move fast to create those data centers which have these kinds of certification. We need multiple levels of security, both at the data center, in the networks, in the software, and in the application. And again, that's something which will require us to relook at every single application and see how this can be built in. And frankly, if you are going to have a couple of 100,000 servers in a data center, you need to be very careful about how you design it and build it, because the current generation of data centers, which have upwards of 500,000 servers in a particular data centers, have efficiencies which are 4 to 2 times better than what you are seeing currently here in India. And being an energy deficient country, that's the kind of investments which we will have to make. I wanted to also give you an idea of some of the challenges and what you need to do to create applications and services for the cloud. If you look at what we call a private data center is something which you own, and typically when you create even a government data center to me is a private because it's owned, it's something which you own. You control everything there is inside that data center. And yes, you have discrete applications which run on these servers. You can also provide various platform services to your employees or to your customers. You also have infrastructure which you can share. And by and large, most of the data centers in India today, whether it is in enterprise or whether it is in the government, really is in this area. It is all about virtualized hardware, software, with certain elements of security, but applications which are more client-server based, and where it is really not user provision. It is still somebody in the data center providing those applications and services. And what we've got to do is to really make it truly cloud-enabled, which means that soft applications and software become a service, platform becomes a service, and even infrastructure becomes a service. Now, the way to do this is to ensure that while you're building your private data center, you're building the applications or the infrastructure or the platform as a service, you need to ensure that you use a set of common technologies around identity, around virtualization, around management, and even software development. The way client-server applications were developed in the past seem primitive by cloud standards today. The tools which are required to create a multi-tenanted, user-provisioned, highly secure application which can scale across hundreds of thousands of servers is something which we still don't use. And one of the messages I'd like to give to the government is that they should start adopting some of these modern tools which will enable them to design this next generation of application. What is important that these tools will enable them to actually create the documentation, be able to ensure that they meet certain process standards and quality standards, and therefore if it needs to be modified at a later stage, it is much more amenable to change than the bespoke application development which is currently happening here in India. So usage of tools to automate and to perhaps enhance the productivity of a software professional to developing these kinds of applications is going to be important. And what is also important to ensure that you have a set of common directory services and service management so that you can actually manage these huge data centers. What are the options which the government has? And I think Renu's actually identified that very clearly. They're looking at private and public participation. My definitions here of a private cloud is a government cloud. It's owned and operated by the government. It provides some greater control. It provides more customization. It enables sensitive and confidential data to be protected. And there are many applications where national security is dependent and they need to run and reside in these government data centers. But there's also the option of what I call private, which is government, and public, which is somebody else who's providing a public cloud infrastructure, but which is managed by the government, but it's hosted by a cloud service provider. That's what another model which Renu had also talked about. This can be highly secure and it can be extremely cost effective because the capital infrastructure and the investment are all done by organizations outside of the government. And then finally, there are a host of citizen services which can actually be put on a true public cloud where most of the real private data remains either in the private public cloud or the private cloud, the government cloud, but which can actually then scale on a massive basis at a cost which perhaps even most government data centers would not be able to provide. Here, infrastructure and applications are on a public cloud. It's an optimal mix of cost and control. It's agile and secure. It's scalable, it's cost effective, and it's citizen services oriented. Our recommendations to the government is that both from a governance perspective, whether it's G2G applications or G2C, adopt a cloud-first policy, which I think the Department of IT has already done. It's about building cloud-ready applications. We need to facilitate that, both private sector and government, working with the developers, with the startups, with the whole ecosystem which India should be really proud of, which exists and which we should move from commercial applications to more government-oriented applications. We need to establish what are the key cloud standards. We should accelerate the growth by providing incentives for MSMEs. For MSMEs, the cloud is perhaps the best way of providing applications as a services. It is cost effective, it is simple to use, and there are a number of different ISVs who have created applications in India which is focused really on SME, and we need to encourage more such. Whether you want legal and compliance, whether you want productivity solution, whether you want accounting, inventory control, customer relationship management, smaller ISVs have created those applications and they are very, very appropriate for small and medium enterprise. And lastly, I think we need to also ensure that to protect the interests of consumers and as well as small, medium enterprise. Big enterprises will always take care of themselves. The service level agreements which these cloud service providers should be providing should really be looked at, and again, it should be done in partnership with the private sector. We also need to foster innovation, because there's a huge potential. This huge software ecosystem which India has needs to start developing application, not just something which you can use on your smartphone, but which can be used for the good of the country, whether it's for citizen services or it's for helping the small and medium enterprises to really flourish in India. With this, I'll stop and I'll pass it back to the organizers.